This is Eddie Morra, and just a few days ago he was an average unemployed writer. But now he has an IQ of 1,000, making him the smartest man in the world. But he wants to kill himself by jumping off this building. So what happened to him? Let's find out. Eddie is an unemployed writer. He has a contract to write a book, but is struggling to write even a single word. And his apartment is a mess. At lunch, his girlfriend Lindy gives him his keys back and breaks up, frustrated with his lack of career progress, while she has recently been promoted to editor.
At least she's honest.
Walking miserably down a New York street, he bumps into his ex-brother-in-law Vernon, whom he hasn't seen for 9 years. Vernon is friendly and invites Eddie for a drink, and they talk about Melissa, Eddie's ex-ex, who is living upstate. Eddie confesses he is behind schedule on the book and cannot write words. Vernon claims he's currently consulting with a pharmaceutical company and passes Eddie a new brain drug set for market release next year, which will increase the brain capacity to a maximum. Vernon has to go but leaves his business card. Eddie takes the translucent pill on his way home. In the stairwell, he bumps into his landlord's wife, where she rails him about late rent and lack of career. The drug begins to take effect drastically, increasing the IQ, and Eddie notices things with clarity. He starts talking to the woman confidently about legal studies, and a short time later, they write her law school papers together, then have sex. Back in the disheveled apartment, Eddie notices the mess and starts cleaning it up. He then gets on his laptop and starts writing. The words just rain on him and he manages to finish a good portion of his book. The next morning, he's back to normal, but he has several hundred pages of his book printed out. He takes them to his editor, who is surprised but assures him she will read a few pages. When Eddie is back at his apartment, he checks his voicemails. The editor is anxious to talk. She has read 40 pages and is impressed. Eddie goes to visit Vernon. Vern's face is bloodied and won't say what happened. But he explains the drug is called NZT48 and asks Eddie to pick up his dry cleaning and some food. For another pill, Eddie will do anything, so he does so. Upon returning, the door is open and the apartment ransacked. Vern is on the sofa, dead. Eddie, stunned and scared, settles down and calls 911. While waiting for the cops to arrive, he searches for the NZT stash and finds a plastic bag full of pills inside the oven, along with a wad of cash and an address book. He hides it from the cops, who at the police station eventually release him after a short interview. Back at home, he takes another pill, restoring his intelligence. We then see Eddie's life in a set of scenes, him getting a haircut, working out, buying new clothes, and finishing the book in 4 days. He then learns the piano like a maestro in 3 days. He gambles and wins a lot of money. When he's on NZT, he can learn a new language by just listening to it for a few minutes. He also bangs women, of course, and talks like a know-it-all about everything to new friends. One of his listeners, stockbroker Kevin Doyle, gives him his business card. Thereafter, Eddie is invited to a jet-set beach party down south. He zooms around with a babe and a Maserati, then shows off by cliff diving from over 100 feet, revealing that the side effect of NZT is to move ever forward, no holding back. He has an epiphany on what to do for the rest of his life, but realizes he needs lots of money to do it. He slowly starts day trading, winning a few $1,000s per day, but needs more capital quickly. So he finds a Russian loan shark, Gennady. The Russian hands him $100,000 but threatens to skin him alive if he doesn't pay it back. Now Eddie stock trades in earnest and rapidly increases his brokerage account to $2 million. Job offers and reporters call. Kevin Doyle offers a meeting with elite entrepreneur Carl Van Loon. At dinner, he meets up with Lindy, who is impressed with the new Eddie. And as you can guess, they end up having coitus and get back together. One day when the couple is on the street making out, a man in a tan coat seems to be spying on them. Eddie is nervous, sensing something. In the next scene, Eddie meets legendary corporate raider Carl Van Loon in a restaurant. Eddie talks about some smart shit, then expounds on his knowledge and hints at a formula based on mass psychology. In his car, Carl tests Eddie by showing him files about various companies. Eddie figures out there is a big merger happening and impresses the old man further. Carl then drops Eddie off at home and asks him to meet again the next day for another discussion. Suddenly, Eddie is not feeling alright. He experiences blackouts and loses track of time due to an emerging side effect of NZT. Among disjointed events, he gets into a fight and recalls Bruce Lee movies to help him battle a gang of muggers in a subway station. What the f***? After another blackout, he ends up in a bar, not remembering how he got there. He then shags a blonde woman in a hotel room. 18 hours later, he finds himself back to normal, limping but without memory of recent events. He wakes up in his bed the next morning, but his can of NZT-48 is nearly empty, and he's afraid of the side effects, so he decides not to take another pill. But he cannot decipher the corporate files anymore. He calls to beg off the meeting with Carl, but Kevin convinces him to attend. In the meeting, Carl asks him about Hank Atwood, a corporate rival who came from nowhere to prominence 2 years ago. Eddie is not on NZT, so he's back to dumb mode and doesn't understand a thing. He gets distracted seeing the news on TV about the murder of a blonde woman in a hotel whom he banged last night. He excuses himself, goes outside, and vomits, fearing he may have killed the girl during his blackout. Fearful of NZT's side effects before taking another pill, Eddie tries to find Vernon's other clients to understand more. He goes through the address book and calls the numbers, only to find out all NZT consumers are either dead or hospitalized. The next call he makes coincidentally rings the phone of the tan-coat tough guy sitting on the other side of the bench, who was also following him a few days ago. Eddie sheds his pants first and makes an escape. He meets his ex-wife Melissa. She is a strung-out junkie, looking like a malnourished fried chicken, admitting to have taken NZT too, but stopped taking it when she realized no one could operate at that level of mental activity without bad consequences, then found out from Vernon that other users had died. Now off of it for 2 years, she cannot concentrate for more than 10 minutes and her life is a mess. She urges him to tap her off slowly, as stopping all of a sudden will kill him. When Eddie is walking home, he is confronted by the Russian loan shark Gennady, demanding his money. He beats Eddie up and finds his last NZT pill on him and takes it. He feels good, and after getting his 100k back, he lets Eddie go. Eddie, sick and miserable, staggers into Lindy's office. He tells her everything, admitting he needs the drug and that he has hidden his main stash in her house. Leaving Eddie collapsed on the floor of her office, she recovers the plastic bag herself. When she's coming back, the man in the tan coat starts chasing her. He viciously kills 2 bystanders that try to help her as she runs off and hides in Central Park. She finds Eddie, who encourages her to take one of the pills. She does so, turning her into a creature of beauty and intelligence. She then runs off and escapes by using an ice skating girl as a weapon, gashing the face of the tan coat man. She gets to Eddie, giving him the pill, and they end up having coitus. For some reason, every scene ends with sex in this movie. In the morning, she wants nothing more to do with NZT. Eddie says he needs more time with it to set things up.
Look at those blue eyes.
Once again, Gennady meets Eddie, this time wanting more pills, threatening to kill him if he doesn't provide it. Afterwards, Eddie hires 2 bodyguards to protect him against Gennady and the tan coat man. He meets Carl again, looking and acting sharp, and is put in charge of brokering the largest corporate takeover. Eddie has figured out the proper dosage to take, remembering to eat and sidestep alcohol to avoid blackouts. He hires a chemist to reverse engineer the NZT pills in a short 6 months to reduce the side effects. At a restaurant business lunch, he recognizes a police detective from Vernon's death investigation watching him. The cop shows Eddie the photo of him in the newspaper, which identified him as being at the hotel where the blonde girl he banged was murdered. Eddie hires good lethal lawyer Morris Brandet, who gets him off against weak circumstantial evidence. Finding his hotel room raided, Eddie buys an $8.5 million secure condo or fortress with a good view. At the office, the corporate was supposed to sign a contract with Atwood. Though he is a no-show, Carl and Eddie meet Hank Atwood's wife, who tells them Hank is in the hospital. The deal will close when he gets better. On the street, Eddie notices Mrs. Atwood's scarred limo driver, the man with the tan coat, and realizes Atwood must be an NZT user as well, and is sick because he is out of NZT. For now, Eddie must go to the police station and stand in an ID lineup, but his lawyer Morris Brandit gets him released. At the office, Carl is upset since Atwood is in a coma and Carl wants to know where Eddie has been, thinking he knows what is going on and suspecting betrayal. Eddie excuses himself to take another NZT. In the washroom, he discovers his pills are missing or stolen. Back in the room, a box arrives addressed to him. He finds the severed hands of his two bodyguards inside, which prompts a scared Eddie to exit, leaving a fuming Van Loon behind. At the condo, Eddie watches TV and sees Mrs. Atwood and her lawyer, who is also his lawyer, Morris Brandit. As he realizes the lawyer has stolen his stash of pills, Eddie hears a noise and sees the Russian coming for him from the security camera, who tried to get through his steel door with a chainsaw. Eddie goes to the balcony edge, ready to kill himself rather than succumb to his undoubtedly painful torture. He suddenly remembers where one last NZT pill is and tries to retrieve it and manages to do so, only to drop it as the Russians break in. Kennedy orders his men to search the house and shoots up his own last pill, converted into an injectable form, and begins to prepare Eddie for the slow, painful torture he's about to experience. With one final thrust, Eddie manages to turn the tables and kill Kennedy. And since he still has NZT in his bloodstream, Eddie drinks Kennedy's blood. What the f***? Back on the game again, Eddie fights the Russians and takes them out. At the hospital, Hank Atwood dies. Eddie meets the man with the tan coat in the waiting room, telling him that Brandit stole his pills and did not give them to Mr. Atwood. The tan coat man decides to help Eddie and get revenge on the sneaky lawyer for betraying his boss. He takes Eddie to Brandit's house, and while the tan coat man watches over him, tied and gagged on the floor, Eddie searches through the safe where he finds his pills. After a 12-month time jump, Eddie has written and published a book, and he's running for the US Senate in New York. He gets a surprise visit from Carl in his campaign office. Though warm at first, Carl hints that he knows about NZT and that he is the one producing them. Subsequently, he has shut down Eddie's NZT lab. Carl offers a limitless supply in return for some future inside information. Eddie aggressively comes back. He says he has multiple labs and has re-engineered the pills, reducing the side effects and making it last longer. He then pushes Carl away, and the old man leaves with his tails between his legs. In the ending scene at an upscale Chinese restaurant, Eddie and Lindy are together again. He orders his food in fluent Chinese, then notices Lindy's bemused stare. But this time, they don't have coitus, and the movie ends.